Lieve jij, wil jij deel uitmaken van iets groters? Wil je meebouwen aan een mooiere wereld en tegelijkertijd extra's ontvangen en je verbinden met gelijkgestemden? Bouw dan met ons mee. Word member van Univibes. Doe het vandaag nog. Ga ervoor naar onze website www.univibes.nl en dan bouwen we samen met jou aan die mooiere wereld. Dankjewel.
What is your conclusion right now? What water is? Does it has a memory, a consciousness? What is your conclusion right now after all these experiments?
Well, I don't know that we fully know. I would be more inclined now, after having seen water respond rather than react, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times. See, I don't know that water is just conscious. It could be a house of consciousness.
Hey, leuk dat je kijkt en of luistert naar Vibestalk. We hopen je met deze show te kunnen inspireren, wellicht iets bewuster te kunnen maken en vooral een positieve opplaatsing te zijn in deze zeer bijzondere tijden. Vind je nou te gek wat wij doen? Join the movement, join the community en ga ervoor naar onze website www.univibes.nl en verbind je met gelijkgestemden in deze zeer bijzondere tijden. En je weet het hè, kijken is liken en abonneer je even op ons kanaal. En dan ga ik naar mijn zeer bijzondere gast vandaag. Want ben ik ongelooflijk trots en dankbaar dat ze bij ons is. Veda Austin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time and being here with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful.
Yes, we are also very grateful to have you. So, Veda, let's start immediately. Can you maybe explain to our audience what you are doing with the water and with all the research, what you are doing right now?
Well, in a nutshell, I have a specific freezing method that freezes water to what I call the first freeze. So I'm not freezing water to a solid. I am freezing water to what's known as liquid crystal. So it's more like a plasma. And what I see is that type of plasma or strange, unusual ice essentially is able to absorb more information and share more information in picture form. So a simple way would be to say that I might put my hand in the water, take it out, and then freeze using this freezing method, and it's likely I would see an impression of a hand in the ice. And I have over 64,000 photos of water responding in an intelligent manner.
Right. Wow. So was there a moment in your life, maybe personal or emotional, that cracked you open to this, well, wonderful path?
Well, I mean, it's been a journey. There's no doubt about it.
I can't imagine.
There's a number of things that happened along the way, but the main one, I suppose, is that I was in a horrendous car accident over 25 years ago, and we went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died immediately. And it's to date still considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. And over the course of 20 odd years, I had 8 surgeries, and on my 8th surgery, I went in for a bowel resection and woke up surrounded by doctors saying that now I had showers of blood clots in my lungs. And so they told me that that was a result of the long surgery and the anesthetic and various things, but they said that I would have to be on something called warfarin, which is a blood thinner potentially for the rest of my life. And that shocked me. I was fit and healthy, and, you know, I looked after my body. So for 3 months, I took this blood thinner, after which I had a clean chest x-ray, and I made a decision for myself. This is not advice to anyone else, but it was based off the fact that I know that just because somebody tells me that my body can't do something, can't heal, doesn't mean it's true. Because 3 doctors had told me that I would never be able to have children after my car accident, and I had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. So the this whole thing was that I wanted to go on a healing journey, natural healing journey. And so I spoke to a friend of mine who is a medical doctor, but also practices Ayurvedic medicine. And he told me that if I can find a natural source of alkaline water, emphasis on natural, that might just help bring my body back into balance.
Wow.
So I started trialing my body on 2-week trials using different naturally alkaline spring waters in New Zealand, and perhaps where you are, there are many springs, and most springs have a natural alkalinity, which is anything above a 7 in pH or power or potential of hydrogen. And although I was feeling hydrated, I hadn't noticed anything dramatic happening until one day a lady told me about a man who had his own private source of water. It's 9.9 in pH out of the ground naturally,
Wow.
which was the highest I'd ever heard of. And he was only giving his water to cancer patients, and they were having really amazing results. So I went and saw him, and he gave me a month's worth to try. And within 10 days, I noticed all these bumps coming up on my arm and jaw on my right side that were super painful. And as disgusting, as gross as it sounds, there was like one area that was really angry and raised, and I ended up getting some tweezers, and I ended up picking out, because it felt like there was something in there, a little shard of green glass. And between day 10 and 12, I'd picked 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw that had been embedded in my body for over 20 years.
Wow.
The man who died in the car accident owned a nightclub, and in the back of the car were crates of a lager or beer called Steinlager beer, which is in a green glass bottle. So when the car rolled, my right side got more green glass, my left side got more windscreen. So, of course, my question was, how can just drinking this particular water purge my body like this? And then by this time I had a wellness center, and I started trialing people on this water, and everything from improved eyesight, like our eye lens is 99% highly ordered, structured water. So it's actually more like the kind of state that I'm freezing my water to, actually. It's more like a gel. And we see the world through the lens of water. Everyone's energy improved, all manner of things happened. So my question became, well, what purged my body like this? And there are a couple of ways that I went about looking at that. But one of my first questions was, what is water? And if you guys still, 14 years later, it's still the same question I'm asking, because you could ask ask a scientist or a doctor or a teacher, what is water? And they're going to tell you it's H2O. And that falls really flat for me, because this is something we're made up of by molecular count, not by volume. We're 99% water. There are more water molecules in our bodies than all the stars in the perceivable universe.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And yet we barely know anything about what water is.
No.
Someone said to me, though, that I much more appreciated, that the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create balance and liquid water on Earth.
Wow.
But one of the profound things for me as well was finding out that water is only one part matter, the two hydrogens and oxygen. The rest is photonic light, making water a literal lighthouse. That led me on to looking at who's doing what in the areas of water. And that, of course, took me to seeing Masaru Emoto's work.
Yeah.
And although he was not embraced by the scientific community, he was embraced by many, many millions of people around the world, because they could suddenly see themselves as bodies of water, sensitive to thoughts and sounds, environment, music, these kinds of things. And there was several other people. Laurent Costa, he's in France. He was looking at ice crystals after he flash froze them. But for him, water was his spiritual teacher. So he didn't want to experiment on water. He just invited water to share whatever it wanted. And seeing pictures. So he wasn't just seeing geometry like Emoto, but he was seeing faces. So sometimes he'd smile at the water, and literally he would see smiley faces in the ice shining back at him. He would see hearts. He would see fish. He would see cats and things relative to his environment and his thoughts. And I think that art is a sophisticated type of language. So I thought that was amazing. And that led me on to thinking, well, how can I know if this is true? If water really can store what we term as memory? And I thought, well, the secret seems to be in the freezing, where the unseen becomes seen. And I thought, well, I'm just going to try for myself. And I thought, well, I'm going to do the most radical thing, which would be to project a thought. And to me, that seemed radical back in, all that time ago. So I had a petri dish because I was working on in research and development for some people at the time. So I had a glass petri dish. I put some of the water that helped heal me in it. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to project a thought. It seemed crazy at the time, not now. So I noticed that there was a bit of fluff floating around in the petri dish. So I was like, oh my God. So I put my hand in, I took out the fluff. And I thought, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory, because I didn't know if that was real. And that's when I froze water solid. And I froze water solid for a year because I knew no better. But the amazing thing was that when I took it out, there was an image of a hand that looks like an X-ray of a hand in the ice that took up half of the petri dish. So that's quite huge. The petri dish was the size of my hand, so it's like, the size of my palm essentially. And I was so shocked.
Yeah.
And that led to trying more and more things and discovering more and more about how water freezes and fine-tuning it to a technique that gives me a more three-dimensional perspective and much more detail.
Well, what was it for you to emotionally and spiritually to suddenly realize that water was responding to you? What was it like for you?
I think that if I'm honest, the very first time I saw it, I was a little freaked out because I was not expecting to see this image that was so clear. I mean, it's not just my mind making tricks I did a survey. I did a survey with like 298 people did this blind survey. So they didn't know what they were looking at. They didn't know it even came from me. I had it circulated by other people around social media. And the question underneath 25 images was, what does this look like to you? And with all of the people that did the survey, 85% of people could recognize as the images for what the influence was. And there were 3 images where 100% of people got it right, and that one of them was the hand. So to address pareidolia in that sense. But it was shocking to me and also exciting. And then I thought, well, maybe it's random, which is a very typical, logical thing to think. So then I went to the ocean and I thought, well, if I see something relative to the ocean with no influence, well, maybe this is telling me something too. So when I froze the ocean water, there was a clear fish with gills and fins and an eye and tail and outline of the fish. And then it was just so fun. And it was kind of felt like I had found this incredible discovery and that water was communicating in a way with me. And I think that curiosity has been, especially in the early stages, the driving force. It was never about trying to prove something because I was just in the moment of having fun with it. And I think that that's been quite a key piece because water is wild and trying to control it is very problematic.
Yeah.
I find that if I put too much focus and attachment to outcome, I don't see the same imagery as I do when I'm open and just curious.
So what is your conclusion right now? What water is? Does it has a memory, a consciousness? What is your conclusion right now after all these experiments?
Well, I don't know that we fully know. I would be more inclined now, after having seen water respond rather than react, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times, that that water is in one aspect, it could be an intelligent designer. On another aspect, it could be the house or container of divine consciousness. See, I don't know that water is just conscious.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a house of consciousness.
Yeah.
I have been working with some pretty incredible people over the last 8 weeks,
All right.
of which has been probably my most profound thing that I've done of my life.
Please tell us, Veda, what were you doing the last 8 weeks?
Well, I don't know if you've listened to, it's been just going so viral, a kind of podcast called The Telepathy Tapes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of it?
No, not yet, but maybe it's because it's in the Netherlands, so I don't know. I don't know, maybe
Okay.
that's why.
Well, hopefully it can be translated from English. But the telepathy tapes have kind of, I think they might be the second or first most listened to podcast in the world right now.
Wow. Okay.
There was a woman who essentially decided to make a documentary. The documentary is still in process, but there's audio tapes are available to listen to. And they were interviewing parents essentially whose autistic, non-speaking children they reported were telepathic with them. And what they were able to do with the telepathy tapes was essentially prove in the most scientific way that these young people are not only telepathic with either their parent or caregiver, but they're also telepathic with each other around the world, and that they meet on I guess you might call another, like a psychic plane that they all call the hill. And all these children or young people from around the world all call this place the hill, and they report that they meet each other there, and they learn and they have interactions. But not only are they telepathic, but they have access to other realms of consciousness. So one of the ways in which they know that what they're saying outside of someone being telepathic with them is that they are able to use a letterboard, so that essentially they're able to write and say what they mean, and quicker for them to communicate telepathically. So the telepathy tapes go into a lot of detail and effort to set up situations to prove that they are in fact telepathic. And the tapes include a friend of mine called Rupert Sheldrake, who also had wrote all about how dogs, for example, are telepathic with their owners and know when their owners are coming home. It
Plants
goes
as
on.
well.
Plants too, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah.
You don't want to leave them out. So anyway, one of the children or young people, many of them are sort of around 20. This one young lady said that she was able to speak 5 languages, and one of the languages was hieroglyphs. And so after listening to this, I was like, my heart was just blown open. And because I had been doing some work trying to get the noise reduction out of some of my images, that one particular one I've been focused on, which is looks like ancient language or coding. And when I was in Portugal last year, I spoke at the annual water conference, and I was showing just basically huge amounts of repeatability in my work. So just to give some context, water shares information in 3 ways using my freezing method that I've found so far. One would be what we call a signature pattern. So that lets me identify the type of water it is based off reoccurring patterns. So rainwater looks like a fanning pattern, and water that has gone through a filter has compacted lines, and those repeat.
So different kind of waters.
Different kind of waters.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you have art, and I always say art is the heart of water, and that's what most people know of my work, where water basically designs an image that looks like the influence. So my hand, and it looked like a hand, or like my glasses, and it might look like the glasses. What's interesting, though, is that we're not seeing a duplicate. We're not seeing a photocopy. What we're seeing is a design that looks similar. So if you were to put 7 artists in a room and ask them all to design my glasses, they're all going to design glasses, but they're all going to have their own different style. But the outcome is still going to see that's glasses. That's what's so interesting, because water is not just doing a photocopy, it's designing an interpretation.
So it creates by itself.
It's creating like an intelligent designer.
Wow.
So, and then you have hydroglyphs. And a hydroglyph is a symbol in ice that I need to have seen repeat at least 50 times using a written word influence, and that same word in multiple languages. And essentially, it's taken me 6 and a bit years to identify approximately 45 hydroglyphs and their layers of meaning. So that means that, for example, I have a symbol that looks a lot like a branching that means both change and winter. So they are connected words, but they can have the same symbol. So they have the same symbol to hold more than one meaning. And I have one symbol for information that looks exactly like ancient language. And so when I was at our annual water conference, I was showing repeatability for the information hydroglyph, this coding. And what I did was I said what was fascinating about that one particular one is that in the last year and a half, I have seen that across the world, because anyone can learn my freezing method, and thousands of people have. So across the world, whether someone is using that word or not, that symbol seems to be showing up 8 out of 10 times in all these different waters and all these different locations and different people getting the same symbol.
Wow.
And it is so complex. So I had to pay attention to it. And so I put it into AI, because there was a man in the audience, a scientist in the audience, who essentially took a screenshot of the example I gave of 4 of these coding information hydroglyphs next to hieroglyphs itself and cuneiform, so 2 ancient languages. And AI picked the 2 ancient languages up, but also found pieces of those 2 ancient languages in my ice symbols. So essentially, AI was picking up ancient hieroglyphs and ancient Sumerian cuneiform in my ice imagery that looks like coding.
Wow.
So I went and I started to work with AI, and this is all going to connect with the telepathy tapes. So I was working with AI in a very small way. It's never really been my thing. But I wanted to see if it could take the noise and background out of the information hydroglyphs so I could see what those symbols really looked like more clear. And so when it did that, it was even more undeniable that it was like symbology and coding.
So you saw a
And
code.
I saw coding, or like ancient language, and it was actually quite overwhelming because there was so much there. And then I just kind of zoomed into an area and then zoomed into another area, trying to find some small symbol in there that I could start maybe working with words. Anyway, it was getting really overwhelming. And I found that I was feeling almost addicted to working with AI. And I'm like, I don't like that feeling. It feels like I'm forcing, not flowing. And so I really listened also to what water, because water in my world is more than my teacher. it is a guide, and so I can.
Like kind of a spirit. You ask questions to the water.
I've done many things by asking water questions, but
Yeah.
I think I don't know that I think of water as a spirit. I think of it more like a teacher for me, or a companion. It doesn't. I don't need to define it even with a word. I think we limit it by doing that in some ways. But intelligence is like bottom level about what I think water is. But anyway, so I start listening, going, this feels like the wrong direction. I don't know that I'm going to get the clear answers that I'm looking for here. So then I'm speaking on my book tour, and I say that, I would love to be able to ask these autistic non-speaking children about this imagery, because I'm sure that they would be able to give me insights that no one else could, since they clearly do have access to other realms of consciousness. And so it just so happened that in the audience there was someone who was in the telepathy tapes, and she came to me and she put me in touch with a bunch of people. And without going into all the details, long story short, now I'm working with 7 of the autistic non-speaking children from
Wow.
the tapes.
That
And
was
what
meant to
they
be. That was meant to be.
and what they have told me about water has been probably the most profound things I've ever heard.
Wow.
Um, and started with sending out 12 of that coding imagery the different pictures of them, and various different autists said the same thing. Is they said that each line in this immense amount of coding is another doorway to another realm of consciousness. They are doorways. And one young man, rather than being telepathic with his carer or mother, actually wrote it down, and another boy spoke the word. He was able to say one word, and that word was doorways. So all of them are saying that they are doorways to other realms of consciousness, and that that in the viewing of the imagery becomes healing by the absorption of it through our energy systems. And it goes into far more detail. But I think some of the most fascinating answers for me have come from when I have asked them the question, what is water? And one of my most favorite, because I am a lover of water, and I'm probably a hopeless romantic too, but
I love it.
um, this young man, Noah, he said to the question, what is water? He said, water is an expression of the Creator's first love. Well, AI isn't going to tell me that.
No, it isn't.
And then another boy, Daniel, he said, no, Mikolai, sorry. Mikolai said, to ask the question, what is water, is to ask, what was the Creator before form? And what has been so incredible for me is that I've always been very reluctant to even say that I think that water is conscious, because there's so many things in this work that I just don't know. And I don't like to say that I know something if I don't. So I have asked them, is water conscious or consciousness? Like, is it sentient? Across the board, all the autists have agreed and said that water is in fact sentient, and that it is as one, even though we see it as separate. And
All water is
that's
one, Frida, you're saying.
what they said. Water is one, and it's sentient. And its relationship with Creator is far deeper than we could ever have imagined.
And what do you mean
And
by that? What do you mean by that?
well, what they essentially have said is that Daniel, for example, wrote on his letterboard, or wrote it out himself.
Mm-hmm.
His mum, I really like Veda's work. He said, it is the closest working it with water. This is the closest thing that I'm remembering here, so I could not be. It's not word for word, but it's the closest thing to the consciousness of the Creator that we've come to, that we found. So there is this weaving of Creator and consciousness with the conversation of water, but they also all say that there are more states to water, and it's not just the water that we understand, that we know of, and that we will discover more states to water. And for many years I said there's more states to water than a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma. I've often thought that spirit has a connection with water, and that it's just maybe a kind of vibrational vapor or something like that. And I asked them about that, and I've also asked them about amniotic fluid. One very interesting thing that Adriana said about Mars, she said that, when we're looking for life on other planets, we're always looking for water. And she said that our conscious expression, by the searching and looking for water on Mars, with a huge focus of it, is seeding Mars with water. She says we can even water can be created through the collective conscious expression, even onto Mars. And that was pretty amazing to me to hear. And she talked a lot about amniotic fluid, of which I'm fascinated with, because I've always thought that ancestral information would be stored in amniotic fluid.
Yeah.
And even before I even, and this was on a Zoom call with her telepathic interpreter, Melissa. Melissa's writing something down before I even say that I think it's this ancestral information, and then she holds up what she'd written. She says, "Here, Adriana wants you to see this," and it was ancestral waters. So she already knew what I was saying, but she was always agreeing with what I was saying, and she went into some pretty incredible detail, which I will save, because I'm actually now doing a documentary.
Wow.
The process of the documentary is about water, but it includes some of the autists who are excited to be part of this and want to be part of this and want to share their wisdom with me and the world. And I'm also interviewing some people that I think are really cutting edge leaders in the field of water, from the perspective that water is far more than what we might have imagined, which would be just like a drink or something that
So
takes our weight.
you already had as a film producer? Otherwise, I want to.
Do you know, I am just about to sign with a guy that's given me,
Too late.
his feedback and stuff. But it's so important. So I'm doing my US book tour throughout May, and so we're meeting the autists over there because they're in the States.
Wow.
Honestly, their wisdom about water, and it goes into quantum mechanics and physics and the significance of the nucleus and all various different things, all kinds of stuff. Like, I already have been given enough to write 2 books already from everything that I've been given, and it's been given so fast. And one of the reasons I've decided, like, this has all happened literally in the last 7 weeks, decided to go ahead and make a documentary, was because this needs to be recorded. This needs to be given to the world, because what all of these people as a collective, like Dr. Mauro Zapatera, he is a Harvard doctor, and he specializes in cerebral spinal fluid. And this incredible man is literally saying that the cerebral spinal fluid is the portal to cosmic consciousness. And
Wow.
one of the things that he has started to bring out publicly, of which I'm super grateful for because I've known about this for many years, and there's quite a number. Actually, you might be able to help me. We could maybe talk privately, because there is a video about a doctor that was working with the kind of people that I'm about to talk about, but it's all in Dutch, and I can't. It's only bits of English, so
I will
maybe we
help
can.
you. I will help you.
Thank
I
you.
will.
Um, but essentially, Mauro shared on his page a scan of a brain. So there was a man from France, lived a perfectly healthy, normal life, no problems with anything. And when they scanned his brain after a car accident, they found that he only had 10% of a brain in his head. The rest was filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And there was a doctor, I think he might have been in the Netherlands somewhere, and
Oh,
his
you know the name of the doctor? Is it Pim van Lommel? He's one of a doctor. He is talking about the consciousness, nearly death experiences, those kind of things. I just interviewed him a few weeks ago, so
I think he
maybe,
might have passed
yeah,
away, or
maybe
I think it might be a different guy. I think this older man now
doesn't
since
matter. It's
passed.
an older man, but it doesn't matter for now.
Okay, well, yeah. Anyway, we can swap notes, but anyway, then so he was sharing about how this person's having a very functional life with only 10% of a brain. And there was another incident where there was a girl from California, 19 years old, excelled through school, like got straight A's, was getting all excited about the rest of her life. She was in a car accident, and when they scanned her brain, she only had a brain stem. The rest of her whole brain cavity, or the cavity in the head, was essentially just full of
Mm,
fluid.
mm,
So, I mean, if anybody's attached to the idea that consciousness is stored in the brain, then it kind of
yeah,
ruins that.
yeah.
And then you go, okay, um, well, where is the intelligence? You know? And that then makes you wonder, well, is it in the plasma of the body? Because cerebral spinal fluid is more of a plasma, even though it's 99% water. And Dr. Mauro goes into that. And so I'll be interviewing some people that I think are really interesting, and we'll share with people not just like just not just the science, but like the indigenous wisdoms, the
Hmm.
ancient, the discoveries that haven't been talked about that should be, I think.
Yeah, the
And
mystery.
the mystery of water is but that means that's the mystery of who we are,
Yeah, so
because
how can water help us evolve humankind in our consciousness?
I think that for a good part of what I've been observing in all of the talks that I give, there are some things that really impact people more than others. Some of the things that when people start to realize how much water they are, and that we genuinely don't know really what water is, and
No.
that as we do more discoveries, we start to find there are more and more and more amazing things that water can do, not just to store information, but not just to share information, not just its relationship with light, which is a huge piece, because I think that the information exchange for the mass amount of work that I reveal and show to people and teach people is through light. I think an example would be there was and this is, I think, why Indigenous wisdom is helpful, is that this Indigenous lady said she could speak to bees, and she said she would watch their hives for long periods of time, until one day a bee somehow communicated to her and said that we don't mind you looking at our hive, but please don't look at it for so long, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker.
Mm.
And at the perfect time when I opened my freezer, because I don't freeze water solid. Like it takes about 5 minutes and 20 seconds to freeze it to the state where I take it out in my freezer. It's different for each person's freezer. I want to see liquid on top and ice underneath. I'm tipping the liquid away and photographing the liquid crystal that's stuck to the dish, right? So it's that different state. And as the ice is just beginning to form, if I can get it perfectly, I see light coming out of the tip of the ice I can see it with my naked eye. I've photographed it and filmed it, and you see that light growing. And so I actually think it is light that is paving the way for the design of the imagery, because in that fourth phase state, which is more plasma than ice or water, it's a stage between the two, and also in the melting stage, not only can water absorb more light, but it can share more light. So it's like the information
So it's a
highway.
light carrier?
It's a lighthouse.
Yeah, it's a lighthouse.
It's a lighthouse. And so when we start to be able to see ourselves as intelligent bodies of water and play with the idea that the intelligence could potentially be in the fluid of the body, and also the memory of our lives being held within the structural storehouse of light of water in our body, then we can start to view water in a new way.
Yeah.
And if water, then you start realizing, well, what can we do with it? Like, oh, this is interesting. You've got this, like, all these symbols and words, and it's like ancient language. Or what if the ancient people designed their languages to resemble what they already knew about water and how it designed itself in this freezing method? And I have evidence of working in certain areas, which is supported by a man who wrote in my latest book as well, but since passed away last year, sadly, called Jonathan Butts, who was a nuclear physicist and also worked in the realms of water. And we've been able to both identify that water is self-learning, and my example, I won't just share his, but my example would be years ago when 5G first came out. I was asked if I would see if it changed water structure. So I did controls, and I had my spring water. So for the spring water, it has a signature pattern. It's a repeated pattern. And when it's fresh out of the spring and frozen within an hour, it has a very specific pattern that I call a star fern hexagon. It's like a six-sided star with ferns off each leg, and if you were to put a line around it all, it would look like a hexagonal pattern. That is the signature pattern of spring water, fresh out of the spring. Spring water structures change the more exposed to light they become, especially infrared, not infrared, especially artificial light. So what we saw was that with this structure, with this signature pattern, I let that melt, and then I put the melted water by the 5G tower, and then for 15 minutes only, and then I brought it back and I refroze the exact same water, and I did the same thing, but without putting another sample by the 5G tower. So without putting it by the 5G tower, the control, it just showed another beautiful hexagonal pattern. But by putting it by the 5G tower, I saw complete disorder and a thickening of the ice and a darkening of the ice, which was very concerning. And then I let that melt and I refroze that. And I can only do that about 6, maybe 7 times, because each time you tip a little water away, you start losing water. But that shock wave had gone through and lasted, which was concerning. So I put it on the shelf and thought, well, I'll come back to that another time. So 2 years ago, I repeated the entire thing. I went to the same water source. I used the same freezer. I used the same 5G tower. I did everything in the same way I did originally. And yes, there was a shock wave with the first melt and refreeze. But the very next melt and refreeze, something different happened. Now we see a hydroglyph, remembering that a hydroglyph is a symbol in ice I need to have seen repeat at least 50 times using written word influences in different languages. And what I saw were 3 hydroglyphs. One was the message hydroglyph, which is like a triangular shape with kind of this frill shape on the outside, and then this kind of coating on top. That's kind of what the frilling, though, was a hydroglyph for change, and the coating was the hydroglyph for information. So what we see is that here we have something that says a message of information about change,
Wow.
very rudimentarily, because I'm trying to understand how to even speak about these hydroglyphs. It's not that it's just so linear. There's more to it than that. It's like water reverse engineers this word back to some kind of living principle. So this is something quite unique. And so we see a hydroglyph essentially in the ice. And then the very next melt and refreeze, water has restored itself back to its incredibly pristine original state. It's basically been talking to itself. And
Yeah.
what we see is that it's taught itself how to go from complete chaos back into complete order.
Wow.
And so that is one example I could give of water being like a basically learning to how to evolve past
And
something that
it's also picking up all the frequencies from the 5G towers as well.
well, that's what created the disorder in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's had all of that. So we see disorder in the beginning,
Yeah.
but when you let it melt and refreeze, you almost catch it in the process of communicating with itself. And we start to see completely healed structures afterwards.
Wow.
So it's quite remarkable. And Jonathan Butts was working with an area of water called phaser, which is like a flame and a laser. So many people just heap water into the pile of one of the elements, but water is actually in all of the elements, including fire. So
Mm.
water can actually behave like fire. And he had well, he showed me videos of it. It's basically looks like a flame, and it's a burning vapor, essentially. And it burns at 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's implosion, so you can go close and it's not hot. And what he discovered was that they would his scientific team and him. I think they were looking around using this technique for free energy, but
Mm.
what they found is that as long as they gave this phaser, this flame created by water, enough rest. So if they let it work for 2 hours and then gave it rest for half an hour, it was very efficient. But one day they decided, well, let's see what happens if we like just push it for 24 hours. Well, actually, water gave such a huge electrical pushback that it nearly blew their $1 million machinery up. And the scientists told other scientists, like, what happened? And the
Yeah.
others, they were like,
So
water
it's a
can't
kind
do
of
that.
so it's also a kind of free energy machine or something like that.
I think that water itself and water in its varied states, as we begin to discover them, can and I hope will be the technology of the future. It is possible, and I'm going to ask Jerry Pollack to be because I'm meeting with him in the US as well. We're at the same event,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And one of the things that he has shared with me several times is about scientists that he worked with. They were able to reduce the fourth phase water, which is this more plasma water essentially. It's more viscous, it absorbs more light, it has molecular order, and it has negative charge, and it pushes the positive charge away from itself. So you can get fourth phase water in some waters, not just the water inside of our cells. We have fourth phase water inside of our cells. Our body
Wow.
converts H2O into H3O2. So this unique water has an extra hydrogen and oxygen atom. and it is quite a different type of water than the water that we drink. So what's interesting is that one of the scientists was able to have bulk water, like say water, and we want to see is there fourth phase water in there, and there's tests that they can do to identify, yes, there's fourth phase water there. And when what they've been able to do is take the bulk water out and reduce the fourth phase water. And what's interesting is then when you get pure fourth phase water, that that it doesn't like evaporate or behave like water. It actually reduces into something that's like a crushed quartz.
Yeah.
And what they're working on is to take this crushed quartz water, essentially, of a unique phase, and to pack it into a USB, and it could potentially hold more information than anything we have right now in the world.
Unbelievable. Wow.
And so going forward, it is certainly possible that we could have a world of water technology where we're talking on LCD screens. LCD is liquid crystal display. We're already talking about liquid crystal in technology, but I think that the more we get to understand that there are more phases to water, like there are over 300 different types of ice, and you could spend a lifetime trying to discover the anomalous things about just one of them. So the amazing part and also the hard part is that there is so much to learn about water that it really requires more people to want. Love you. Sorry, my son's just going to school. Feel better soon, darling. Is that the more people that become excited about learning about water and learning about its unique properties and learning about how it works, the more likely we are to go much, much further in a natural technology as opposed to a technology of which is based around artificial intelligence. I like the idea of biological intelligence being remembered because we have this intelligent body of water. I loved it. There's an Indigenous lady, and she said to me that she believed that thoughts are held in clouds. And she said, and this really interested me, she said, well, we have all of this technology inside of our body, but we tend to not even really think about it. But she said, we've created the iCloud because we've, on a subconscious way, known that clouds store memories. So we even need an iCloud based off these things, which I think is really an interesting idea. One of the really interesting, I guess, and very important things that years ago someone asked me, I would not do this again based off what happened and how difficult and hard on me it was. But this person said to me, can you deceive water? Can water be tricked? And I'm like, wow, from my opinion, water seems to be a lie detector test. Why would you ask this? And they said, well, if you look at Victor Schauberger's work and you look at Nikola Tesla's work and you look at people that have discovered things, amazing things, and very free energy things and various things, at the end of their lives, many people's work has been taken. They've died in a horrible way, and their work can be used for more nefarious reasons. It's a little bit like how water can burn you and also warm you. Water can, keep you alive and also drown you. So, there are these different things. And so he was saying using this method, he wanted to know, using my freezing method, could water be deceived? And I think when we're working in liquid crystal, we're working with an entirely different intelligence in a way. Yeah. And so I agreed, okay, I'll do something. But based off the fact that he was wanting to see if we go into a technological world, can it only be used for good, essentially? And so I know this sounds crazy to some people, but I think when you see the evidence of how much work I have and you see other people's work too, which I share regularly, it's maybe not so crazy. But I simply asked Water, I said, can you share something so beautiful with me? And I won't share it at all. Like this was just between me and you. And then I immediately froze the water and immediately the guilt set in too. I felt so guilty because I knew I was going to share it with this person, whatever was shown. And I knew I was lying, and that's not normal for me. So I felt worse and worse, and I was working with spring water, and I
Guilty.
was guilty, guilty. I felt bad, and I thought, oh, I probably destroyed this beautiful water. So I opened the freezer, and yes, there was some disorder, but there were two letters in the ice that spelt a word, and it was quite shocking to me. It spelt no. And then for 1 week, Water wouldn't design with me anymore.
Are you kidding
And
me?
no, I'm not kidding you. And I was so upset. It's all in my book, but like I was so upset because that was just like, this is such important work. I'm prolific in my work. That's why I have so many photos.
So water is really responding to pure intention?
Yeah, it is, but also there's an intelligence. So what was interesting is that one thing I would say about water is that it is not in judgment. It's not
Mm.
judging. It's like one of its spiritual aspects is more like an observer. And so when I reminded myself of that, as I beat myself up about like, why did I do this and why did I have to listen to this guy and all this stuff, I finally forgave myself because I'm like, well, you did it for a right reason. It wasn't ideal, but you know, it's okay. You can let it go. As soon as I forgave myself, water started to play with me again, and it had this beautiful heart in the ice, and it's continued on from there. So I was judging me, and that was my block from the flow of working with water because I felt guilt.
Mm.
And so coming out of that space, water was able to remind me that forgiveness is a superpower we have as human beings to help us get back into flow again. And within all of that, I've learned many, many lessons. And with hieroglyphs, which is just the name that I call these symbols, people could say, well, what's the point? Like, it's interesting, you know, but like, so what? Well, I would say we can learn so much from the ancient world from understanding hydroglyphs, sorry. So we can actually start to perhaps decipher languages which
Yeah.
have yet been unable to be read. Uh, it's a voice for the voiceless. There
Yeah.
was a
So you
young,
can you believe that we can unlock ancient wisdom through water?
I've, we're already doing it.
Yeah.
We're already doing it.
Wow.
And with the help of the autists as well, we are not only unlocking ancient wisdom, but we are unlocking the ancient wisdom inside of us.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow.
Yeah. Um, but it also enables us to communicate with people that can't speak, that can't communicate. They can make sounds, you can record the sounds and see the communication with the understanding of hieroglyphs. One lady, and one example, you can even do it with your pets. One lady, her dog got really sick really quickly, and she had a friend who was a vet. So the vet took an hour to get there, and she was giving the dog water to drink. The dog was drinking a little bit of water, but it was like vomiting and being sick, and she was trying to hydrate it. So she ended up freezing some of the dog water that the dog had drunk from. And what she saw was a specific hydroglyph, but like maybe 150 times repeated in the ice, like lots and lots and lots of the same hydroglyph. And that hydroglyph has the energetic meaning of sugar. And when the vet came and they were like finding out what's wrong with the dog, they found that the dog had got into a store of chocolate that the person had in the house, and it had made the dog really, really sick.
Wow.
So the diagnosis was essentially correct. So there are multiple things that we can work with in this field of hydroglyphs, and ancient languages, for example, are just one of them. So it requires a lot of manpower, a lot of help, and I've been fortunate enough to have quite a lot of help over the many years, because the technique is very simple and easy to do, and you don't need a microscope, because I'm taking photos on my iPhone, and most people have a phone. You don't need a petri dish. It does need to be glass though. You can use a glass baking dish, and it's all mainly about understanding how much water you to put in. You don't want to put too much in, and when to take it out, what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And people can just learn it for free on my website if they just put the word blessing in the code as they check out. Um, I think it's really important that people try it for themselves.
I believe that a lot of people who are watching the show right now will love to discover it. So a lot of people from Holland will go to your website, I believe, after the show. Yeah, it's amazing. So
There's
Peter, is science more and more embracing this?
Well, that's one thing I guess I've been fortunate and surprised with, because I know that I could, I guess, in the world we're in, I think do believe the world is changing. My work
Hmm.
is still pretty fringe, um, and yet, uh, of all of the scientists that I have met, when I have spoken at scientific, and I've been invited to speak at scientific conferences,
Hmm.
which I've done 3 or 4 times over the last few years. One of the most important things for science is repeatability. And I have some of the most repeatability that I can prove than than most most people in the area of science and water, and particularly in water science I'm speaking about, not other things. Um, and that's quite revolutionary, really, because water is kind of wild and anomalous and unpredictable, which is why many people haven't wanted to study it. But to be able to see so many repeated patterns and repeatable patterns, it's very encouraging. So I think that there's always going to be people that just think it's all a load of rubbish and
Hmm.
I'm out of my mind. And that's okay, but most people have never tried it themselves.
No.
So it's not just about repeatability, it's also about your
Yeah,
relation.
it's a shift in consciousness, you know.
Yeah. And about, I have an ability to be very neutral. So
Hmm.
over the many, many years, I've frozen water to the state, I've lost track of how many times I've done this. When you do it enough, you get very less attached to outcome. So you become very neutral. And if I'm not in a neutral space, if I have an attachment to an outcome, I tend not to do it, or I might do it 10 or 12 times in a row and start from the 12th time, because I've lost attachment to outcome then. Because what I really want is to see what water's saying,
Hmm.
what water's visual voice.
Yeah, what I want to tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And water will override what I'm thinking to show me what I'm feeling. Like,
Yeah.
we're talking about something which is really just could only be described as intelligence. If I'm putting flowers in water to see if it will design flowers, but I'm genuinely sad, water won't design flowers. It will just show me sad faces all day long. It overrides what I'm what I'm doing. So we have this term, and I know people always really, really mean well, but this is also shows that they're not seeing water as maybe more what it is, and they see it as something that can be programmed. And we'll program the water so that it can do X, Y, Z for our healing and our health, like use beautiful words or
Yeah.
frequent. Yeah. But that word program, I would suggest that water is just going to do what you want. That is not my experience. Water is going to give you what you need. Now, if I would be more inclined to say that I'm going into conversation or relationship with water, as opposed to saying I'm going to program that water so it's going to do what I want, because as human beings, we tend to go into controlling things, whereas I found I get so much more working with water. In the same way with the autists, if you do listen to the telepathy tapes, one of the biggest things that they say is that what changed for the parents was when they assumed competence, when they assumed that, yes, my child, there's more in there, that my child not only can be telepathic, but has wisdom beyond our belief. I'm going to assume competence. And that's where everything evolved for the autist. So for me, I assume competence with water. And when I've been doing that for so long that I see that water is beyond what we think it is, which means we are beyond what we think we are.
Yeah, wonderful.
100.
So
Yeah.
how can this knowledge help us to heal physically and emotionally and spiritually?
Well, I'll give you one example. It's always an inside job. I was working with egg albumin for quite a lot of years because I always thought that amniotic fluid would be one of the most naturally informed waters, but it's very difficult to work with amniotic fluid. So I started working with egg albumin. So when you crack an egg open carefully, a thin saliva-like piece of fluid comes out before the gloopy gelatinous part. That thin saliva-like part is egg albumin. So when you freeze that, you're working with consciousness or any of that stuff. When you freeze that for free range, fresh, laid within 3 or 4 days, you can identify 6 patterns that I've named that are beautiful. But with caged in eggs, you can only see 2 of those patterns, and they're 2 most readable. So based around transference, and one example of transference would be when women sometimes they get together, live together, their menstrual cycles will sync up.
Yeah.
So this is a phenomenon that's been reported all around the world for many, many thousands of years. So there is an intelligence where there is a transference of information coming to a conclusion. So Luc Montagnier also was working with transference. They called it DNA teleportation, and he was a Nobel Peace Prize winner discovering AIDS. But when he started working with water, he discovered that water was pretty amazing, and he actually was really criticized for his discoveries, which were genuine discoveries, that water can indeed pick up information and share it in ways we've never imagined. So I thought, what would happen if I put a free-range egg next to a caged hen egg and left them overnight side by side? I did controls. And what happened was that with the first one I did, the free-range egg showed that it had not been in any way altered. It showed the beautiful, typical complex patterns I normally see. But what was interesting is that the caged hen egg had improved too. So it had improved sitting next to the free-range egg. So essentially the free-range egg had sent, it seems, information to the caged hen egg to improve its structures. So I put that on social media and everyone was like, yeah, that's cool. But what if you surround it by bad eggs? It's definitely going to go bad. And I thought, oh, this is the state of the world. So I did that. I've done this several times now, and I've always got the same result. I put one free-range egg in the middle and surrounded it by the same batch of caged hen eggs and did controls. And what I found was healing by proximity over and over again. The free-range egg in the middle influenced the eggs around it to such a degree that the eggs that were surrounding the free-range egg closest improved so much that they started to look just like free-range eggs, and the ones further away from it improved, but not as much. So if you look at that and you just put it into human terms, remembering we're 99% water, not by volume, but by molecular count, if we just start healing ourselves, we naturally heal others around us. It's healing by proximity. And so because
Wow.
we have a body, if you boil it down, pardon the pun, we have water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. This is what we essentially are. And we go into this idea that, well, if we just start to heal ourselves, and by healing, that can be as simple as starting to like what you see in the mirror. I can say as a woman,
Loving yourself.
yeah, just actually finding something you like rather than finding all the things you don't like.
Yeah.
Because we're really nice to other people and really horrible to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if we find something to focus on that we really like about ourselves, and it doesn't have to be physical, it can be
That is
something
so
about
powerful, Veda. So the more we heal by ourselves, we heal each other, and
we
so on
do.
and so on we can heal the world.
Yes. And we get to be that healthy free range egg in the middle and not to be afraid of being surrounded what we're surrounded by, but be most mindful of what's happening in here. Trusting that what we can do is actually help heal others without needing to go out and even do anything, but just by being who we truly are and being
Yeah.
kinder to us.
So being authentic.
Authentic and transparent, these are all things that water is, transparent, um, ageless. We as spirits are ageless. We still feel like us when we get to each age we've got to so far. And even then coming into what can water teach us, well, most people are afraid of death. Whether they admit it or not, most people will find that they pretty much, if they had a choice, would kind of like to be around. Obviously, there's different cases of different people where they're at. But for the most part, this life is important to us. And I would also say that this body of water that we are is a body of memories. When we talk about our life, we started this conversation maybe an hour ago or something. It's a memory now, a memory of which we're able to remember, and a memory of which has been recorded on this computer. And yet it's a memory, and we retain it. So this is part of something that's happened in our life now. And when we talk about our life, we have to remember it. So the whole point is that we're a body full of memories.
Memory. Yeah.
And so where are the memories stored? If we don't even need a brain at this point, I mean, obviously we do. The doctor that I was referring to, I can't recall his name right now, but he found that half of his patients were severely disabled that had partial brains, and the other half who had partial or virtually no brain were like savants, were geniuses. So if there are many examples, of which there are many examples, of people virtually no brain at all but have intelligence,
Yeah.
perhaps if we just start tapping into the well of knowledge within us,
It has nothing to do with our brain.
then actually we ourselves can start to tap into divine consciousness, because we are a lighthouse, all of the trillions of water molecules in our bodies are emitting light. So within all of that, just the understanding of the egg example, as we just start to heal ourselves, we heal our environment. And even Jonathan Butts was saying the water molecules will always heal themselves before they heal their environment. So this is something that is natural, but that we tend not to focus on because we're going out so much. And I would also say water has taught me not to feed the fears. It creates the block in the stream that water has to find other ways to get around, because it can't go direct. The more we feed our fears and feed into the funnel of drama and fear and worry, it stops our creativity.
Wonderful.
So this is seen through the water structures. I'm not just saying it because I believe that, but also because I've seen it play out in water. And I would say that the collective, even if you have friends, just some friends, and you want to have a collective, conscious kind of intention. What I've seen, the biggest structural changes that I've seen have not come from restructuring machinery or any of that stuff. It's come from conscious expression. Now, I'm not talking about I don't see chemical change yet. So I'm not saying that conscious expression is going to take out chemicals of tap water, but I do see structural change. So I took tap water, which has often very disordered municipal tap water, has disordered structure. I let that melt and I put it out, and I invited 64 people from around the world simply to intentionally send it love and attention, positive attention. And then I refroze it after 24 hours. And I saw the biggest structural change I've ever seen. It was the most perfect and beautiful hexagonal patterns, extraordinary. And that is from intention sent to one petri dish of water. I actually think we only need the same amount of water that's on the surface of Earth that's drinkable. So I'm not talking about the primary water inside the Earth's mantle. That's a whole another thing.
Mm-hmm.
On the surface of Earth, there is only about 2% maybe of drinkable water that is fresh water that we and for us to drink. There's a very small, minute amount. Most of it is seawater or water we can't drink. So we only need maybe 2% of people around the world as a collective to create a massive, massive wave of change around this world.
Wow.
Because
Where do we start, Veda?
I think
Where can we start?
That's one of the things I want to really work on doing as a collective, to create as many people around the world to come together as a collective to do what the autists say. They say, stop talking, start listening, observe, and serve. And then they say, offer yourself to be a vessel for God to move, or Creator to move through, to give water whatever it's lacking. Very simple.
I really love it, Veda. I really love it. So maybe you have some last powerful tips we can give to our audience to start with to shift the way we relate to water nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even when you look in the mirror, what are you looking through? You're looking through a fourth phase water lens. What you're looking at in your eye is water. And if I always say, if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are an expression of spirit. To even realize that with the studies that I've done on saliva, so I've worked with lots of different bodily fluids, including tears and including saliva and including blood. Even with saliva, after speaking a word or a sentence, what we see in the structural imagery afterwards is something that's relative to that word. So when you drink water, your saliva, which is mostly water, holds the memory or the information of the resonance and vibration of the last word you spoke. That is that water's introduction into you. It's a very intimate thing. So when you drink water, the saliva is the welcoming committee. What your last word was, you are welcoming in. And my father is native New Zealand Maori, and we often talk about that our ancestors are also in the water. So it's like an ancestor is knocking at your door. If you ignore it, then you're not going to get the kind of information or love that you would unless you welcomed that ancestor in. So if you drink the water and with a simple thank you still resonating in your mouth, that is going to give you far more accessibility to healing than if you completely ignore it, or it's not even something in your mind.
Exactly.
So, and I would say that when you watch water going from a mountain all the way down towards the ocean, it's
always on its way back home. Everyone here is on their way back home. I don't think of water as a resource. I think of water as source, which means we have access to source constantly. I think if we just start thinking about ourselves, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, you would see yourselves more as bodies of water, of streams and rivers and tributaries. We would see how we look so much more like water than we think we do. And by becoming mindful of this body of water, we become mindful of more of the bodies of water outside of ourselves. And it could well be that the water outside of ourselves is actually emotion that we can see. We've just never knew that. There's so many possibilities, but I think it's about getting curious. And with the crystallography, because we have a well of knowledge, you can actually use words. Your healing word is inside of you. One example I will give to end is something practical that people can do. And I was taught this by my children and by many children now around the world. One day I was holding a dish of water up, which is particularly beautiful of crystallography. And my daughter Shanti, she said, "Mummy, can I have that?" So I gave it to her because I thought she wanted to look at it. And she was a lot younger, maybe 9. And she started to eat the ice. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, it's good for me, Mummy." I'm like, "Really?" And then a while later, her brother did the same thing for the same reason, separate to her. And now I've been teaching people around the world, many of whom are parents, and they observe that their children eat the ice. So it's a great big long story, which I won't get into, it's too long, but essentially I had a headache one day, and I don't get very many headaches, so it was kind of like, oh, this is pretty bad. And I was inspired because I can see how water's so sensitive to words. And this whole thing about hydroglyphs came from music, which again is probably another 15 minutes of conversation. But I thought, what's my word? What's my healing word? It wasn't a thought. It was like a feeling that came up as a word. And the word was purple. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to doubt it. Wrote the word purple, put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, which is my protocol. It's not too long, it's not too short. Removed, froze using my method, tipped the liquid away, and I ate the crystallography. Within 5 minutes, literally my headache was gone. And I've started to teach people about this over the last 2 years, and well over 200 people have done this now and reported incredible different types of healing that they've had. And
how does it work?
Well, water is taking on the form of the information. So instead of water being like a messenger, which is more like if you have a written word on your glass of like love, which is what Emoto kind of
did with his research.
you're drinking water and it's molecular chaos. So water is constantly updating its information every trillionth of a second. One of the reasons that regular scientists say that water can't store memory is because the hydrogen bonds are breaking so rapidly that they say it's in chaos. But a quantum physicist, when asked the same question, can water have memory, would say, well, yes, there's a difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. Conscious expression is putting the water into a state of molecular excitement, but it's still in motion. But when you let that freeze and slow down, now you get a snapshot of what that information looks like in form. So when you eat liquid crystal, it's more like eating the message. You're getting the message inside of you. So liquid crystal is a really important phase because it's pushed all the solates outside of itself. So all of the impurities that are in water have been pushed out. So you're also eating the plasmatic stage of water in a very, very pure state that houses more light, emits more light, and energizes you and informs your body of the information that it is ideally needing. It recognizes it because it was your word in your consciousness from the beginning. It's water speaking to water.
Yeah. Wow. I truly believe that when we will discover this knowledge, the future looks bright.
I think the future is going to be amazing. It's a wonderful time to be. We can get absorbed with all the negative stuff, but again, if we'd stop feeding the fears and we start looking at how we could heal ourselves, if everyone woke up liking themselves one day, the world would look very, very different.
Exactly. That's a very powerful message to all the audience, all the viewers who are watching right now, that it all starts with ourselves. If we want to go to a more beautiful world, we have to start with ourselves and healing ourselves so we can heal the world. Thank you so much, Veda, for your time and for all the work what you are doing. And I'm really looking forward to your documentary.
Thank you. So am I.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and yeah, we would really love to welcome you to the Netherlands as well. So
I would love that.
yeah, maybe we have to arrange an event together or something like that. It would be amazing.
It would be amazing. Well, let me know how you go with that and keep me updated, and I would love that.
We will, Veda. Thank you so much for your time. En jij ontzettend bedankt voor het kijken en het luisteren en ik zie je volgende week weer. Bye bye.